All right. Hello and welcome back to the Y Comics podcast. I'm your host, Jesse, and with me today is a third time returning guest. I would say sometimes a third time returning champion, Grace Benfell. Grace, how are you this night?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm just vibing. I don't know if I told you this, but I guess I posted in a place that you might have seen it. But
Yeah.
I got a ton of comics the other day.
I missed this. What did you pick up?
So okay. First of all, I picked up 2 volumes of Absolute Last Man.
Okay.
Watchmen, which I have read, but I have not read in like a decade.
Okay.
Hellboy, Volume 1,
Okay.
which I think is like the first 2 paperbacks. And I also picked up My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness.
Okay, I know that one too.
Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me.
I know that one too. I've heard such good things about Laura. I want to say Laura Dean is drawn by Sweeney Boo, but I could be mistaken.
I don't have it right next to me, but I could go look.
But I heard much praise for that one too. That's one of the ones that, like, I need to pick this up one of these days. I just haven't.
I really adored it. I think it's worth checking out.
Well, Grace, I am glad that you were picking up more comics, but surprisingly today we are not talking about comic books themselves, but we are talking about the media surrounding comic books, which is the comic book movie. I'm going to move my mic real quick, so sorry if anybody hears me move my mic.
That was a very quiet mic move.
Thank you. I tried my best to be as quiet as possible, but I should warn everybody because I do not edit these things currently because I am too tired to edit out mistakes.
It is hard. Editing podcasts is hard. In fact, Idle Talk recently came back, thank God. We just posted an episode and we're recording another one soon. But it is hard to edit podcasts. That's the biggest obstacle for me in making them happen, I think.
Seeing some of our friends record something and then heavily edit it and put it out within 24 hours is maybe the most impressive thing I see some of our mutual friends do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I on some level I feel like it's either like a part-time job or like a real heavy hobby, which I don't think it quite is for either of us. So
yeah.
Anyway,
sadly not yet.
But yeah, we're talking about comic book movies.
Yeah, Grace, you're someone I love to just talk about movies with, and I was like, man, no one ever comes on here and is like, I want to talk about comic book movies. So I'm like, I'm gonna force someone to come on here and talk about comic book movies with me for a bit.
No, it's all good.
I know. I know the thing that we probably want to start with, kind of like get the heavy stuff off from the top, is we are both pretty big, I think, Zack Snyder comic book movie fans.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I have not seen 300 and do not intend to.
Yeah, neither do I. I haven't, and I have no interest in that story in general. So I
it's. I mean, I think it's great that Zack Snyder wanted to make that gay sequel. You know, did you hear about this?
I did. I'm kind of at this point where I'm like, okay, how many of these articles are actually things Snyder did pitch, and how many things are these things that he said he did, but he just was thinking about it?
Yeah, who knows? I'm happy for that. But 300 is just like, I don't think you could adopt that story in a way that's not going to be kind of fash.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I don't think, as much as I love Snyder, I do not think he's aware enough filmmaker to do something with that. Although I know people have takes to the contrary, I just don't. I don't believe it, so I'm just not going to do it.
I haven't seen most people.
Watchmen.
Oh, you haven't seen Watchmen either?
Mm-mm. Yeah, I plan to, but I was like, I watched a ton of Snyder of like all the DC Zack Snyder stuff in like a week. Yeah, and then I was like, I should take a break from this and maybe come back to this later. You know,
Watchmen's one of those interesting adaptations, which kind of starts with like, how do you adapt a comic into a movie? But Watchmen's one of those things where like it's so faithful, and then he pulls a punch, and like everything else could have not been faithful, but that one pulled punch ruins the whole faithfulness of the adaptation.
Yeah.
And I think that's so fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's also the thing, is I wanted to revisit the comic before I watched it, you know. But I'm also just like, I can't believe that there's an edit out there that has the pirate stuff in it.
Oh yeah,
I have to see that.
I think that's the only one people. I mean, it's like almost 4 hours, but that is like the best edit of that movie because he cuts out certain things.
Sometimes like that. I've watched Justice League.
Yeah.
You know?
It's so much weirder because the pirate stuff is all animated, but it has live action stuff buttoning the beginning and ends of every chapter.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
like that live action stuff got cut from the main film.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So
That's
all that kind of
okay.
adds up to make some scenes more poignant, in my opinion, but probably not the opinion of most people.
Mm. Yeah.
So I guess my first thing is like why do we, me and you in particularly, like the Snyder adaptations? I definitely have major issues with how he talks about the adaptations and then some of the stuff in them, but I do enjoy them for what they are.
Yeah, well, I think and I think this is kind of a weird thing to say because when, back in like 2015 when I was a Snyder hater,
Yeah.
um, I think people are like, "Oh, like Snyder's movies take themselves too seriously. They're so grim. They're not very funny." Right, in the way that like Marvel movies are,
Yeah.
or and the thing is I'm not exactly flipped on that. Like Batman v Superman is like a pretty dour movie.
Yeah.
Um but I do think it completely leans into the ridiculousness of comic books in a way that
Hmm.
like I like in retrospect, like I feel like Marvel movies always have to have sort of an ironic distance from.
Yeah.
There has to be like Tony Stark has to crack a joke about how silly this is, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be what it is. And I think that's something that I really enjoy about all three of the like DC Universe Snyder movies is that it really like takes itself seriously in a way that I feel like is really fun, even when it whiffs or is like too
Yeah.
like almost too silly to be believed, right? Like it's just like that's superhero comic books, baby. Like it's very faithful in a sort of tonal way. I think that's really fun.
Yeah, and I think with it's so weird because like we're comparing franchises at two different points in their careers too. Like
Hmm.
the DC universe for the Snyderverse at least was very early in its infancy, but it was at the very peak of multiverse culture, right?
Yeah.
And when the Marvel universe started, there was no such thing as like connected universes like this.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same time, they had like more of they weren't owned by Disney yet. They were like John Favreau talked about, like this was a make it or break it. If this movie didn't work, none of the movies were going to work.
Yeah.
They barely had a plan put together yet at the time. And so when you watch Iron Man 1 and you watch like Cap 1, and even a little bit of Thor and Incredible Hulk, there's a sense of that same Snyder kind of feeling of like this is a comic book movie, but also like we're not going to pull punches with some of the themes in it either. Like
Hmm.
Iron Man 1's very much anti-war in a way that none of the other movies are.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it is and it isn't because it's
Yeah, yeah.
also about how we need the benevolent billionaire to like step in and make everything good for us, right?
Yeah, that's what kind of, but the same thing with Batman vs
um,
Superman. Like Bruce's whole thing is like I have all this money, I have to save
yeah.
everybody.
No, I think, and that's also something that's interesting about like Man of Steel, especially. I think of the Snyder movies is the one that where you can see the U.S. military money on the screen,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But there is sort of a, I don't know, and maybe this is just bullshit, and I don't think it necessarily is materially different in some sense, but Man of Steel there's an edge to that stuff. Especially when like the way like in the opening of BVS, there's this like incredible sequence where there's the U.S. military is doing a drone strike,
hmm,
and then like Superman is directly compared to the drone,
yeah,
right? Like, and so I think there is at least like an awareness of that stuff, right? Whereas like a lot of Iron Man 1, is sort of like there still is a scene where he goes and like military intervenes and gets to be like a badass, right? And it is in this kind of like it's very much in this imaginary of like what if we could do an imperialism in a way that was good instead of bad,
yeah,
right? And that doesn't mean it doesn't have like there's a way that I think it can feel daring, right? But I don't necessarily think that it actually is. But I definitely think it's still different than where we are now with that stuff for sure.
yeah. I think about how like each of the early genre embraces its comic book thing. Like with Batman vs Superman, it very much embraces a tone of Frank Miller because you can't get
Yeah.
away from like Frank Miller and Alan Moore comics when it comes to Zack Snyder. But like with like with Captain America 1, I think about the most. It's very much of those early pulp comics that were selling war bonds. And so the military
Yeah.
has to look good in that movie because that was the point. It was propaganda. And like that's what that first Captain America movie is doing, even if it's more in tongue in cheek, it's not shying away from like being
Yeah.
propaganda. Um
Absolutely not. Yeah.
and
What
that's what I think
I
about.
do think,
Yeah.
I mean, the nice thing about Cap One, and this is also a movie I haven't seen in a while, so like I don't know what I would think of it now. But it does like Cap is good, like capital G good, and the
Yeah.
movie just like totally embraces that
Yeah.
in a way that is nice, right?
Yeah.
Um, and of course, like once you get to Cap 2, that changes, right? Obviously, like by but yeah, so like I don't know if I have like a take there, but I think there is at least a kind of like embrace of like, wow, like golly gee, like because a lot of the appeal of characters like Cap or Superman is like this is just a really good person,
Yeah.
and we just get to see him like interact with the world in a way that is nice.
Yeah, because like
And that's still like a nice thing, I think. And I don't think that's true of like any other Marvel movie, right? It's like just that
it's
one,
and I think it's
you
because that
know.
Marvel movie is set in World War II. And it's really because
Yeah.
like people, I mean, I literally read a book by gosh, who was the news reporter? Brokaw. Where it was like the greatest generation is the World War II generation. It's like, well, okay, is it? But that's what everybody acts like. That's what everybody pretends like.
Right. Well, and it
And
is
so that's why I feel like that movie portrays that feeling because everybody felt that way, especially
yeah.
during Cap One era.
Well, I think that's also like the thing is that, and not that you know, World War II was a conflict between like imperialist and capitalist nations,
Mhm.
right? And I'm not out here being like, yeah, like it's bad that we beat the Nazis or whatever. Obviously, Nazis fucking suck. But like it is like the US did a lot of horrible things
Yeah.
in that period, but because the stakes of the like sort of like ostensive liberal democracy versus outright fascism, you know, there's a way in which you can cinematically like gloss over
Hmm.
that, and it becomes like way less objectionable. Like, cause you know, if like Captain America one was set in like Vietnam, you can't do that shit. You
Yep.
know, it's
Yeah.
impossible, right? And so you get that distance, right? And that's also why like the Nazis keep showing up in Cap stuff, right? Is
Yeah.
because then
And
you're enabled to like scapegoat some of these problems, right? That
yeah,
makes
and I
sense.
think that's why like Cap gets messier in the other movies is because he's not in the 40s anymore. He's not there. And so like he's in the modern time and everybody's perception of modern time is everything's messy. Nothing's clean anymore.
Yeah.
And so like, that's why you don't ever get that with I like Zack Snyder's Superman is never like he's always trying to do good, but he's never like unconflicted, which
Yeah.
is kind of a bummer because like I would have liked it at least by the end of his Superman arc, Clark not being conflicted anymore. And even in Justice League, he's still conflicted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, I do think um, like this is also something that really struck me about Man of Steel. Watching it again a few weeks ago was like because I think it takes seriously like what if a being like this came into the world as it is right now,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, and so I definitely get the like I know that there's that, and I haven't read All Star Superman in a little bit, but that like panel where Superman prevents a suicide or that page, right?
Hmm.
People shared that around a lot. When BVS came out, I'm like, this is what Superman should be, right? And I am like 100% sympathetic to that because I
Yeah.
think like there's something, and yeah, like my friend Kim, shouts to Kim, just rewatched the Raimi Spider-Man movies, and it's like in that movie, Spider-Man's like saving people.
Yeah.
You
He
know?
really is.
He's like going and and like saving burning building people out of burning buildings and like all that stuff, right? And that is like something that is not in superhero movies anymore.
Yeah. I mean,
you
like
know?
you kind of get it
Um,
in some of the Marvel movies, but it's really just them in their own insulated world doing their own
yeah, there's like
things.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely exceptions, right? There's the sequence in Iron Man 3 where he like saves all the people out of the airplane, that
Yeah.
like, feels like kind of like a Superman sequence.
Yeah.
But besides that, yeah, it's like you're in sort of a zone and you have a lot of like collateral damage, and then the movies are about that or whatever, right? um, and that's Yeah. So like I do feel like that is something that's missing from super movies to some degree, that like unambiguous like goodness, or like that just like the joy at seeing someone do something that is just good, right?
Yeah. I
Um
mean, we even got that in the Nolan movies because like I would say at least for the first two, Batman Rises is something. Um but with Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, like like Batman's actively trying to save people from falling victim to the main villains.
yeah. Hmm.
Where Batman in the Snyderverse is actively trying to either create a wrong or undo a wrong.
Yeah, it's true, but I think that's also like I yeah, the thing is, again, I really like all that stuff, and I think this is a gift that Snyder has. I'm sure I haven't seen like some of his, not comic book work like Sucker Punch or Army of the Dead, his most recent project, is
Mhm.
that like both those movies cut to the heart of like what the genre they're in is doing,
Yeah.
right? In like Sucker Punch is basically like, yeah, like superficial like girl power doesn't do anything for anybody. Right, like it's a very like
Yeah.
empty thing, and it's and I don't think that movie like totally works, and it's definitely a movie like written and directed by men, right? And so it gets fraught quick, but there's like it has real power, and I think that that's part of what like um with Batman Superman is like he is just a figure of terror and
Yeah.
of like carceral violence, like literalized, right? Um, and like that it feels really honest, right? And that doesn't mean like I want every Batman story to be that. Like I really want to go back to watch the animated series, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm not saying like, okay, if you want to make a good Batman story or like good comic book, you have to confront that stuff. But I really appreciate the way those movies are like very deeply interrogative of what does it mean for someone to be a symbol? What does it mean for someone to be a god who's also like a human
Yeah, for
being,
sure.
right? And I think those questions, because especially since these figures are like so entrenched in pop culture, are like deeply uncomfortable, right? And that like that is something that I think makes the Snyder movies really rewarding. Is it also when you get the turn in Justice League which is like fundamentally a really hopeful movie, I
Mhm.
think, um, it feels so earned and so rewarding, right? Because you had to go through all this other stuff to get
Yeah,
there, you know?
and I think with Snyder, I think the concept of treating at least the DC pantheon as gods is perfect because that is kind of how it is. Like
Yeah.
DC versus Marvel, Marvel is heroes that we relate to, and DC's heroes that we look up to is always the thing I always say to people when I'm pitching them. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, there's like,
but
I mean, this is a little reductive, but DC
yeah,
heroes don't have to worry about rent like Spider-Man does, right?
exactly. Yeah, a very like, or if they do, you don't see it very often. It's
Yeah.
not a major
Mhm.
plot point ever.
Yeah.
Every once in a while there's a Superman story where he's broke, but like that's very rare.
Yeah.
Um, because he is also a journalist and they technically don't make money, but now they do. Um, not in real life. I'm just talking about comics. uh,
Yes. Yeah.
but but I think about how I feel like, at least for me, again, and this is me like just being hypercritical of the thing I enjoy already. Like I have like 3 different Batman v Superman things hanging up in my room. Like I like that movie a lot. I've
Yeah.
seen it about 20 times at this point. Like I love the
Yeah. Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
I just think he picks the wrong writer to base his gods off of because like BVS is very much based off of The Dark Knight Returns.
Hmm.
And
Sure. Yeah.
you can see it in the cinematography. You can feel it in just the way the characters are written. How it's very kind of Reagan-esque still in the modern time. Um, and I think he really, if he was gonna do the God stuff right, I feel like he should have picked Grant Morrison's JLA.
Yeah. I guess I have not read. So I've read Dark Knight Returns, but I have not read. I've read some Grant Morrison, but not that specifically.
Yeah,
Um. So yeah, but the thing is, I guess I think like that's part of the tension I think that makes that movie really interesting is
yeah,
that like the way Superman's power and its position and place in the world makes him a god, but also he's just a dude from Kansas,
yeah,
right? And like that tension is something that runs through the whole, and like that's also the moment that like where Bruce and Clark like recognize their mutual humanity is this moment where like Like Superman, Bruce never thought once about Superman having a mom. He only thought
Yeah,
about him
no,
as a weapon, right? And like
yeah,
that, and I get like why people are like, oh, that scene's so corny or
but
whatever.
still one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, but like I think that tension is such a great element in it. And so that when that kind of pays off in this way that like Bruce finally like respect, and that's also like I remember when I first saw that movie, and there's the funeral scene where they have all the like military regalia, and there's that fucking Snyder ass slow motion shot of the shell from the big cannon like dropping onto the ground, right? And I just feel like, what is this doing like aesthetically, right? And people are like, this is just empty, like Snyder just thinks shit is cool and so films it, right? And I think, you know what, I think Snyder's kind of a jock filmmaker. I think
Yeah,
that is some degree true, but the thing is, to me, it's like that shot of the shell is like that's what Superman was to everyone, right?
yeah,
Is he was a weapon that is now able to be discarded.
yeah. I mean, he's a jock filmmaker in the same way Michael Bay is a jock filmmaker. Like
Yeah.
they're still both, they know what they're doing still.
Yeah,
But,
no, it's not.
but they're not trying to show that they're knowing what they're doing because they're too busy having fun making the thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually like I've not seen very many Michael Bay movies, but I think that seems like an apt comparison to me. Although I hear that, I mean, apparently Zach is much nicer to on set than Michael
Yeah,
Bay
probably.
is.
Yeah, Michael Bay has I feel like Michael Bay has an ego now that that Snyder doesn't have still.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, go ahead.
but
Sorry.
no, I was just thinking about like there's just so many things that like I enjoy about that movie so much, but I understand its barrier to entry for so many people. Like going back to Man of Steel, like I love the choice Clark has to make at the end of like, do I save the people here on Earth who've like I've been with for my whole entire life, or do I save the last known person of my race? And I have to choose the people I've been with, and that's why he kills Zod. Spoilers.
Yeah.
I should have probably said that beforehand. But that movie's
Well, I mean,
almost 10 years
I
old.
don't know. Yes, it's true.
But
One of the most discussed plot points of internet culture, like recent movie years. So I don't feel like
and like and to me, Superman taking a life, and the only time Superman's taken a life, so far as I know, I'm like purposely taking a life.
Yes, yeah.
It matters, and like I feel like that's a turning point where like I wish like these are like there's a few things like I wish it were different, just so he's already beaten us over the head with a bunch of other things. Why can't he beat us over the head with these things? Like why don't we have a scene where Clark goes, never again. I'm not going to do that again. I can't do that again.
Yeah.
Like, it was too much. Why don't we have a scene like that? Screams so good, but for most people, it doesn't register like that's it for him. He's never going to do something like that again.
Yeah. Well, I think that is maybe that feeds into some of the like nightmare stuff that is in BVS and Justice League, where it's like the threat of Superman becoming something else is like omnipresent.
Yeah.
Right.
But for me, like if you're gonna keep pushing that as a threat, you got to also give us a show that like why should we also question that as a threat?
Right. I guess that's like one of the things is I think my relationship with like violence has changed a lot since I first saw that movie. And so like to me like Zod, I think one of the things that actually also I really like about the Snyder movies is that they have a good balance, because like Zod is absolutely a villain, like absolutely a bad guy, right? Like capital B, capital G, bad guy, like irredeemable on some level, right? But he's still sympathetic.
Yeah.
And I think that's like so to me it's like, oh yeah, like you sometimes, my friend Liv put on her review on Letterboxd, like sometimes you just gotta kill fastest. No big deal.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of my relation to that, but I also get why like that, like why people struggle with that as a character thing. And it also feels like I think Snyder gets an unfair reputation as like a edgy filmmaker, right? But like I get why people were like, oh, it's like of course he would have Superman kill somebody. It's so fucked up,
I think it also doesn't help that like Marvel has already established itself in comics, in and out of comics, that these superheroes don't mind killing people.
Yeah.
If it comes to it, they'll do it, and like they did that from the get go from the movies, and they've been like that in the comics for I don't know how long.
Yeah.
But DC had just such a lineage of like don't kill. And like when it
Right.
does happen, first off,
Yeah.
they always make sure it's a woman that does it because of course. But two, it's a huge turning point in the universe. Like the biggest
Right.
death,
Yeah.
the biggest superhero killing someone is a Wonder Woman killing Maxwell Lord. Again, this is like almost 20 years old, so sorry if you guys don't know about this.
Yeah.
And that was such a turning point that it completely shifted the entire DC universe because that was live on
Right.
air that she snapped his neck. Like that's huge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like I remember there's many things that people were upset Tom King's Batman run with. But there's a scene where he basically breaks who is it? Oh, I don't remember his name off the top of my head. He's an assassin. He's a Russian assassin. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But he basically breaks his neck, but he doesn't like kill him. It's like one of those things where like he can probably get his neck fixed if he saw a
Right.
doctor, but they're in the middle of nowhere and
Yeah.
Batman's like, I'm just gonna leave you here. And I was like, well, you just killed that man. I'm like, did he
Yeah.
though? Like this is a thing that happens all the time. These characters always come back, and that character comes back in like
Yeah.
15
Well,
issues.
there was an element of like comic book exaggeration, and I think that's also like what like I was thinking about. I haven't watched the Tim Burton Batman movies in a while.
Yeah,
This was something I would like to revisit sometime. But one thing is, Batman kills people in that movie, and it's
oh,
not a
100%.
big deal,
100%.
right? Like nobody was like having discourse about it, and I think part of it is that it glosses over it, right? It's a joke. It's like a, like it's just like part of an action scene, right?
Yeah, it's never direct.
Whereas like in BVS, it is like I'm not gonna say like all the like goons that he kills are like humanized, but it does like give them moments of like genuine terror and pain, and like like it's not like it sort of makes you like look at that, right, and like what that
Yeah,
would mean,
like
and I think that's cool.
the closest thing like to a direct kill in the Burton Batman is there's a scene in Batman Returns, and again, I only remember this because I've seen that movie too much.
Yeah.
Where he has a bomb and he just gives it to one of the bad guys and then kicks him into the sewer and then you see the bomb explode. Like
Yes.
the
Yeah.
guy's probably dead.
But
But
the thing is, the tone of that is just like it is a gag, right?
yeah,
Like it's slapstick,
yeah. But in BVS, you have a scene where Batman's taking out all these guys and he throws a guy into a wall and you just see blood on the wall. And you're like,
Yeah.
if that guy's not dead, he's in a hospital for like a year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like when he like fucking stabs that guy over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? Like
So like it's one of those things where like, what is the full direction of this? And I would be this is where it comes to I would be more sympathetic with Snyder, like just exploring like this is the dangers of superheroes. If it wasn't the response when people complained about it, because again, people are just going to complain. But his response is grow up, and I'm like, okay, buddy, you have to remember, like, I understand, like, this is annoying to you, but also, like, think about why people are having this discussion right now.
I that's like totally fair, but I'm like, oh, what a king, But that's just me being a little silly, I think.
And I guess like I never really had an issue with Batman killing people because I saw it as indirectly in a lot of ways, and also we 100% see that these are bad people, like really bad people. So like,
yeah,
it's just like Marvel does it. We can just move along now. I think the biggest thing is though, like, I like seeing growth in the characters too, because we see like we have Superman all three, and so I think seeing growth in Superman is what was really missing. And it's not saying there isn't. I'm just saying that it's not a lot. It's very little. And there's certain scenes where I'm like, okay, I like how this is progressing. Like, I really like the stuff in BVS with Superman and Lois, how that progressed and stuff.
Yeah.
But when he comes back in Justice League, it feels like they don't give him any time to kind of where does he go from here? He just takes a leap to be like, okay, I'm back and let's do this. And I'm like, okay,
yeah. Well, I think that does.
This.
Yeah, like that. And I guess I'd be curious to see what do you do with Superman like after Justice League, and like do you know, are we still building to Nightmare? Like, is that what the like third movie in the Justice League trilogy would be or whatever? Right. But like, I think the thing that I think Esther. Anyway, a friend of mine pointed this out in her. I just keep referencing people's Letterboxd reviews, but like there is a way in which he seems at ease with who he is
Yeah.
in just like the first time. And it is, you're right, like it's subtle. It's not like he kind of gets swoop in and be the hero at the end of that like set piece, right? But it's not like he does not have a full character arc in that movie, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of the movie is about everyone else's relationship to
Mhm.
him as a symbol, right?
Mhm.
Which is still really interesting, right? I
Yeah,
like all that stuff.
I think that
But
stuff's
yeah.
a lot more fun in a lot of ways. But that's also like it becomes to is like how many times can Snyder beat us over the head with Superman's Jesus? But like after the first two or three, like we get it, and so can we beat?
Yeah.
Like that's my thing. Can we beat him over the head about other things with Superman? Like the
Yeah.
subtleties are cool if you are like us and we rewatch these movies a ton. But if you're only watching it for the first time, sometimes you have to just show it's like, hey, this character is different now. And like
Yeah.
for me, my biggest thing is to show like this isn't the Superman from one. It and like the difference between the two. And I understand why they did it because they really wanted a cool moment and they wanted to show like don't mess with the heroes of Earth. But Superman stopping Wonder Woman from killing again. Okay, spoilers, 100% spoilers now for Justice League because this is this year.
Yes, yeah.
Superman stopping Wonder Woman from killing Steppenwolf at the end would have done so much to show that Superman is kind of like Superman shows mercy because he believes anybody can be better. Like he doesn't just
Yeah.
kill people. He's had the opportunity to kill many of these bad guys before, and he tries to make them be better if he can. And that's like one of the greatest things about Superman. Unlike
Yeah.
Batman, who's like, yeah, I would like to get you mental health, but I don't mind sending you to the hospital. Superman tries not to send people to the hospital.
I think just one of the funniest moments in BVS is like when Batman's like, he was like, "Oh, there are places where we care for the mentally ill, but not where I'm sending you."
See, like exactly. Where like I feel like if we see Superman like beat Steppenwolf, but like stave off killing him, and then we watch Darkseid kill him fully, like we do see Darkseid crush his head and stuff, like that would establish okay, Superman is now at this point where he has a code that he's trying to adhere to, and he's up against someone who doesn't care about anything.
Yeah.
And that would then, if, again, this is if Justice League 2 and 3 happened, but like, and then that would establish like a really interesting dynamic between Darkseid and him, and how Darkseid could push him to break that code now.
Yeah. No, I think I don't disagree, but there was a certain level of that stuff just doesn't super matter to me.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Fair.
But I definitely see like why that is interesting, right? It would be an interesting way of setting up something else to come. And I think that's also something that's interesting about like, because I think Snyder said Justice League is his last superhero movie or something. I don't know if this is true.
I think he mentioned that it's probably his last movie, unless something like there's always like those things where like if someone it's like what's his name, the Kevin Conroy's like I won't do, or Mark Hamill's like I wasn't going to do Joker again until The Killing Joke came across my table.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I think it's like his last superhero movie until like his dream job like gets offered to him.
Yeah, well, I think part of it though is like there's no way in hell WB is giving him $300 billion again to make a movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Not,
like,
and not at least until he proves himself in other markets again.
Not for that specifically, but like, it's just that bridge has been good and well burnt at this point.
Yeah. And I think that kind of transitions to something else I want to talk about is like the multiverse idea, right? Like the thing that we're dealing with currently in every franchise is how are these movies connected? And we can all blame Marvel for this. That's fine. But I think the biggest idea is, or the biggest problem is Marvel, since Disney owns Marvel.
Yeah.
And love or hate Disney, there's all this episode is not about like companies and their moral obligation to be good or bad, because they never are. But the idea of like the way that Marvel was successful before Disney, and then Disney just made it a machine after that, it feels like.
Yeah.
Because Avengers is I think the last Marvel movie without any Disney influence.
I think that is true.
They got bought before Avengers came out, but Avengers was already done when they got bought.
Right. I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can see the subtle shift between Phase 1 Marvel and Phase 2 Marvel, and like how it's kind of polished up. And for good or bad, like a lot of those movies are like pretty good. I think overall, like I would say Marvel has between a 70 to 80% batting average in my book. Um, but at the same time, it can get really boring.
Yeah. Well,
And
go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say in that like now that like once the corporation got involved, now we see like the Dark Universe start trying to do something and failing. The DC Universe having issues with the higher ups messing with everything because they just wanted it to be the way that they saw other people doing it. But you have other success stories where like Jurassic Park is somehow like finding huge success, even though I don't like those movies.
Yeah.
Because my opinion matters that much. Or the MonsterVerse. Like, yes, I know they struggled with what was it? King of the Monsters. Like that didn't do as well as all the other ones, but Godzilla versus King Kong did super well.
Yeah.
And so, like, we see some success, but we see a lot of failures, and it's just so interesting to see the multiverse blow up with the corporation involvement, not because the movie started out good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the thing is that I just feel like the multiverse is an extension of like of how capitalism works, I guess, right?
Yeah.
That it's just like you want a product that is going to be everything. And like, I mean, this is like also like video games. It's like every video game has to be the video game you spend time with.
Yeah.
Right? You have to like devote your life to like getting through one Assassin's Creed game because it takes forever. And then there's like online events or whatever at the end of, those ones, right? Like it's just like everything sort of, it has to extend into infinity as like this eternal recurring product to like keep people engaged.
Yeah.
Right. And that's also why like, like Fortnite is the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Speaking
and
of
with all these like corporate ties. Yeah. Yeah. That it's all like, it's all wound up in sort of this like eternally like shifting slightly product, right? And so I think it's like yeah, I don't know, it's very difficult to separate like the existence of this kind of like stuff from that, and this kind of like, and the thing is, it's weird because it does put people in different position. Like when you are making a movie that is technically a sequel to like 17 other movies,
yeah,
you are in a different storytelling position, right, than you would be if you're making even just like Rocky 4 or whatever, right? But I think it's also like, I think if we want to be like, oh, people are still making like, if this is a new form of movie making, I think it's kind of belaying the like material way this stuff is being structured, right? That it is not about telling compelling stories. It is about trying to make products that will dominate your time and your life. Right? And like that doesn't mean people can't like or enjoy the movies, right? This is just like we're in this hell, and not going to see a movie is not like a super concrete political action, like organizing in your community or joining a union or donating to mutual aid is, right? So I'm not trying to be like police people's engagement with Marvel.
Yeah. I'm part of the problem because I want to see Cruella.
Yeah.
I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, but it's fine. Like you can see Cruella. It's chill. I Girl Boss Joker. I get it.
That really was what I was thinking about. Like thinking about Joker or thinking about honestly Cruella. Because if you look at the people who were behind that movie, it's a crazy talented crew behind that movie. So like how for you, like personally, what is the main goal of these movies? Is it to let creators take the source material and be as free as they want with them? Or is there a place for control to be in there to be like, hey, okay, do what you want, but also like, can we rein it in a little?
So I guess I don't know. This is like, the thing is, I guess like what I want, and this is also something that I think is really cool about the Snyder movies, is that those are fucking Zack Snyder movies.
Yeah.
They are not like in a way that like I think even like I love Creed, for example. Like Creed is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Creed's very
I think
good.
Ryan Coogler is a tremendously talented director, and I think some of that comes across in Black Panther, but that still is a movie that has like the Marvel house style.
Yeah.
Right? And like that is just to say that like I do think it is all in service of a brand. And that's also why Disney keeps making like live action remakes of their older movies, right? Or doing like remix villain stuff. And some of that stuff, like I hear good things about Maleficent, for example. I'm curious about that movie.
And I think Jungle
for
Book's
sure.
a really good live action adaptation.
Yeah. Um, and so I'm not saying like, oh, you can't make something that's interesting or good, but I think it
Yeah.
is really, really difficult. And I think there is a difference between um there's a difference between someone who is like a who helps you curb your worst instincts, right? And who shows you the right way to, who's a good editor, for
Hmm.
example, or like a good, collaborator, and like a corporate board that is like checking everything you do, right? Those are just like the relationship and dynamic between those things is like really, really different, you know? And
Yeah.
so, like,
Yeah.
and not saying that there aren't people working on these projects that aren't really talented or can't do that kind of quite critical work, but like at the end of the day, this movie has to like pass a check by, a corporate force, right? And that's just like
Yeah.
the nature of the thing, you know? And that's also why it's, I think, really discouraging to see like all these filmmakers who, have started with like small independent projects get big with something like Nomadland, which I haven't seen, right?
I have not seen either.
Yeah, and then like get swept into Marvel stuff because it's like, all right, once you get to do it's happened with Ryan Coogler too, right? He's like,
Yeah.
it's like Fruitvale Station and then a franchise movie and then like one of the biggest franchise movies ever made.
And now he's
You
making
know?
franchise TV too.
Yeah. hmm And so, and it's just to say that like I and the thing is also I get like I would not decline however many $1 million to make Black Panther, right? Not that they should ask me.
Yeah.
But like I completely get it, but it is also like it sucks. It sucks to see like some of this talent get swept into this like bigger branding,
Yeah. And
Um
I also think about too, like talent. Which I don't know. I like this is one of those things like I struggle with calling things I don't like talented, even though I know it's competent filmmaking and everything's fine with it. Like either talent or ambition, kind of unchecked. Because I think about two of the most divisive DC movies that are not Snyder, and
mhm.
that would be like Birds of Prey and Joker in a lot of ways.
Right.
Where I think Birds of Prey for me personally like really works. Like it works
Yeah.
extremely well, and that is
I
Kathy Ann's like on. Like if you watched what's it called? I can't remember her independent movie. I watched it though like recently because it was on movie. It's like it's her unfiltered like artistic style of being chaotic and how her storytelling is split and everything
yeah.
like that. But then you watch Todd Phillips' Joker, and you're like, this is a white dude's like impression of Scorsese to a T.
Yeah. Yes, I too have seen Taxi Driver. Actually, I have not seen Taxi Driver, but
But like
Yeah.
you even if you haven't seen any of Scorsese's movies, I feel like you watch that movie and you're like, this is I see Scorsese.
Yeah. hmm
Which again, I don't think he had any like interference with his movie. He'd make like it sounds like Todd Phillips made the movie he wanted to make, but at the same time, like I feel like someone in the room could have saw him like, hey, maybe this is too much like somebody else. Like maybe we should do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for one, I think that's also like Joker, I guess if you were wrong, you could like be like, oh, Joker is a triumph of a filmmaker like making something on his own terms or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's still branding stuff, right? And it like
Yeah.
is telling that this is the kind of movie that, like gets a lot of attention and stuff. I don't know. Like, I mean, I have not seen Joker, right? But it just seems like the most exhausting shit in the world to me.
But that's the thing. Like, I was exhausted watching it, and I was going into it like, I'm like this is not connected to anything. We should have a good time with it. It should be different.
Yeah, right.
Birds of Prey is still connected to all those other movies. It's connected to a bad Suicide Squad movie, and they still show how it's connected to it, but it hasn't enough control of its life to do its own thing in just a fun way.
Yeah. No, I've heard mostly really good things about Birds of Prey, so I like to watch it.
And I think about like Guardians and Thor Ragnarok in that way. Like Guardians 1 and 2 are very similar movies in some ways, but like those two movies are such not the Marvel formula in a lot of ways that it's funny to watch some of these directors be able to wiggle their way free.
Yeah, or
to
I
being
think part of
unchecked.
that is that I mean, I guess we'll see. I also those are movies that I used to really like, and I haven't watched them in a while, and I kind of like
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really have a take, but I'm just like I just don't like Marvel movies. I guess generally speaking, like there was a period where I did, and then a switch flipped, and I do not now.
That's fair.
So like I'm not really like eager to revisit them. But maybe part of that is just that I'm forgetting that director's name, but he maybe fits the house, like can sort of slot in there a little more easily, right? I don't know, but yeah, that's just like unbidden. I have not seen that movie in forever, or either of those movies in a long time.
Yeah, so I'm just so curious, like what, like what's the answer? I don't think there is one, but just like what is the answer to be like, what's the right balance of these two? Like, how much is too much corporation? How much is too much freedom? Like I know there is a balance, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing is that it's difficult to talk about this stuff because I mean, for me, it's like I want to imagine a world where there aren't corporations, right, and people can just make films,
Yeah, it's true.
But that does not mean that there's not a creative, like there was not an ebb and flow between people working on that project,
Yeah, I think what my brain thinks about is less of like the corporation, more like these are people who have to make things successful. So like they overstep because they think they know better. But sometimes they do know better. Go with some of this stuff because like it's either going to be just really stale and kind of boring after a while if we go fully in the corporate side of it, but it's also going to be extremely stressful and like maybe exhausting if we go side all the time.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it just depends. And I think the thing is like, if you are a good director, you are also a good collaborator, right? You are also working with people who like know, your bullshit.
Is it like now registering all those times to try to get it back on?
Oh, I guess so. Maybe that's what it was. All right, I think we're good though.
Okay, phew.
I think we're good.
Okay, please don't leave us.
I was just talking about like is that care there, right? And I think the thing is like under like corporate work, you have to fight for that, right? And so I think, like a lot of directors don't, or a lot of people just don't create that kind of thing, or like, or especially if you aren't unionized, which is especially the case in like a lot of special effects stuff in the industry right now.
Oh yeah, special effects stuff is like massively bad with unions right now. Like they were finishing Endgame stuff the night before the premiere.
Yeah, like that, and that kind of thing. And so like, so I think those are kind of the like really pertinent questions for me. And I think the thing is, generally speaking, and I don't think I want to be. There's a way in which people are weirdly reductive about this. I think you can make bad art under bad circumstances. Yeah. I mean, make good art under bad circumstances, right? I don't think that like, being moral guarantees good work, right? But I think it facilitates it a lot better.
Oh yeah.
But also that's not the point, right? I just want to make clear that's not the point. You do it because it's the right thing to do. You don't do it because it's like, oh, this is the way I get good art. You do it because it is the right thing to do, to care for people, right? And so I think that's like part of it is that like when we have a vested interest in each other and a vested interest in making each other like do good work, then like that just enables us to like be better and to make something that we can be proud of together, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like someone who is overseeing a production on behalf of a corporation or stuff like that, their interest is in profit, right? And like that doesn't, and sometimes that means they cut things in a way that makes it work, right? Like I'm not saying that a little bit of an extra hand or someone to oversee something can be bad, and some people I'm sure are really good at doing that part of their jobs, right? But that is just to say that like I don't know if that's the question I want to ask or like work through. Right? Does that make sense? I hope I don't want to just shut you down.
No, but I 100% where you're coming from, because like it's the distrust in the system itself that is the big key, and I think that's what it comes down to is trust, and there's no trust in most of those systems. Like there's no trust between the company and the creator to like we trust you to give you this money and you make a great product. No, it's more like, no, we need you to make it this way so we know it's going to be great in the way that we need it to be. Right.
Well, and I think that's also like, like I think a lot about and I'm not saying like, that that Chris Terrio of all people or Zack Snyder are like immune from the bad dynamics. Like, of course, that's nonsense, right?
Yeah.
But like, I think about the fact that they sat down with Ray Fisher and like actively consulted with him
Yeah.
when writing the cyber parts of the script, right? Like, that is caring about somebody and caring for their perspective, right? In a way that then like WB just complete, and Joss Whedon also, fuck him, like just didn't do later, right? And I think that one of the things that makes Justice League a really special movie to me is like you can tell that Ray Fisher was making something that he was proud of, right? And
Yeah.
I'm tearing up right now, and like and I think that like comes through, right? And I think that's also the thing is like I'm sure that Ray Fisher like shot stuff down or was like, no, I don't want to say that,
Yeah.
or
I mean, the whole
this should
Booyah
be different,
situation.
right? Yeah, exactly. And so like you want to cultivate an environment where you feel like, especially the marginalized people on your staff, right, are being heard and can like voice, what they're going through. And I'm not saying like Zach's always doing that. Like there's the stuff with Lois Lane in these movies is like
not great,
just kind of sexist, right? Like I'm not trying to be like, oh, he's just the woke king, but just to say that like that care does matter. And I think that's like, that's the kind of thing. And I think that stuff is generally, it's way more unilateral than it is top down. Right.
Yeah. And I think like the biggest thing, like just compared to like WB versus Marvel right now is like the bad players are known in WB, and we can see now the corporation protecting the bad players as best as they can. For Marvel, like if there are bad players, like other than just Kevin Feige not getting filmed sometimes, like
yeah.
Which again, I think those quotes are probably taken out of context or taken in a weird context. But like, like I don't think this man has made this many movies and doesn't understand what natural film looks like.
Like, damn, you could film on location.
Yeah, I don't think like that whole quote feels weird to me. But I think like there's at least not enough. There's not a major bad player in that franchise enough to like really ruin anything like that. But you have someone like Jeff Johns who's being protected over at WB, who's like, he's 100% the reason I think Wonder Woman 84 is tone deaf and bad. Other than like just some other tone deaf and bad stuff, I think there's a lot of like there's him in it though. He's co-written the movie. Here's a lot of his isms in that movie. And the only reason like they keep giving it to him is because he's been there for so long. He literally helped re-edit the original Donner cut of Superman 2. Like that's how long he's been there.
Wow. I did not know that.
He was Donner's assistant back in the day. So like but like I like thinking about like seeing Ray Fisher like have that story. I think about Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger, right? Yeah. And watching him in interviews for Black Panther talking about like I wanted us not to pull punches, kind of like in like the way like talking about how our culture's been stolen, and like. And for me, like that's the closest Marvel's been saying, like giving, like being able to tell director, "Hey, here's a message you're allowed to tell now."
For sure.
And so that's why that movie, for the most part, when I first saw it, took me off guard because I wasn't expecting a Marvel movie to at least leave its path that far. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of what makes the movie so frustrating. Is it is still like at the end of the day, that is a movie about a CIA agent assisting the ending of a revolution, right? Which is I mean, there's still, I think the way the movie presents that stuff is like complex, and I think there's ways to talk about Killmonger as a finger that is not just like he was right, but he is the absolutely the trope of the character who makes the like more liberal or like more centrist heroes look good by comparison, because he just does things that are evil, right? And so anyway, never mind. There's a really good piece about Black Panther that I want to shout out, but I don't know if I can find it in time. But
well, if you find out while we're doing this, you're more welcome to shout it out. But before we move on to just a couple questions and kind of wrapping up, because I'm worried a little bit about the recording.
Yes, me too.
I do want to talk about older superhero movies, and also, or not older superhero movies, older comic movies, and also comic movies that no one knows are comic movies, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because people, this is one of the biggest things. People don't realize comic movies have been around for ages.
Yeah.
Not just before, like talking about like people think about the era between Tim Burton's Batman, or like the end of Batman and Robin, and then X-Men. Like there was no real comic movies happening then. I'm like,
well, yeah, isn't Ghost World in there?
Yeah, Ghost
Or am I?
Road to Perdition's in there, like
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
a most violent years in there. Like all of those are comic book movies.
Yeah.
And so I think like people, at least for me, like we need to be excited and also like champion independent books becoming comic book or becoming movies.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Old Guard is like the movie we should get behind, but like I feel like the more and more of those come out, I feel like that's our way to break away from the Marvel formula is by supporting the independent books that are getting their movies.
Yeah. When I think there's also like I don't know. I like just having read like Laura Dean keeps breaking up with me. I think you could make a really interesting film version of that would be a wonderful conversation with that book, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm not saying that that's like, you know, but yeah, I just think like um I think generally it is good when we open up like what is the comic book movie when we start to like open that up
Mm-hmm.
and see what like else that can mean and be, right? And yeah, it's interesting because I don't feel like we get a ton of this anymore because there was a period where it's like because American Splendor has a movie too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it seems like
you
TV
know,
in that piece of the cake because
yeah, I guess
TV's
so.
more open to experiment with those things than movies seem to be.
Right.
Because we got Preacher,
Yeah,
we
because
have The
nerd.
Boys now.
Right, and we're getting Sandman, and there's gonna be a Why the
Yeah,
Last Man show too, right?
yeah. White
Or
Last
am I?
Man's coming out in a couple of months. Sweet Tooth just dropped. Umbrella Academy. I mean,
Right.
even Doom
Yeah.
Patrol is such a weird thing that they're pulling off, and
Yeah. Yeah. That's
so
interesting.
yeah.
Um.
But I think there is a place like I think there's plenty of room for like Saga doesn't have to be a TV show. That could be a movie. Or Paper
Yeah.
Girls is becoming, I think, a TV show, but that also could have been a movie. Like
Yeah.
there's these franchises that are out there that I'm like, these are solid enough that you can make like a 3 trilogy movie out of these, and it can be on par or challenge Endgame or something of that sort. Which I
Yeah.
also, it's part of our questions, but people are asking like, how long until the comic movie boom busts or it's or is it oversaturated? It's like superheroes are, but I don't think comic
Right.
books are.
Yeah. I think that's definitely true, and especially since we're seeing like, I mean, it's not that this people have always been making this kind of stuff. This is like a drum I always want to beat. You know that like it's not as if marginalized people were not making art until 2000, the year
Yeah,
2010 or whatever, right? Like people have always been making stuff. Queer people, like Alison Bechdel, has been like making queer stuff, and like tons of other people, right? That I don't know, right? Have been making queer comics forever, you know. But I do think all that stuff is like more accessible than it
way
used
more
to be,
accessible.
right? Like the
Yeah,
fact that I can go to I live in a conservative place. I can go to the library and check out Laura Dean keeps breaking up with me, right? And that's not like a problem. I'm not
or
going to
you can
get put
go
on a
or
list.
I can go to my local comic store and I can find Ghosted in LA in like the kids teen section, and like
Right.
that's by Cena Grace, and like that's super like queer and friendly.
Yeah, yeah. And so just to say that, like, I think there are a lot more people who, at least given opportunities and stuff like that, and the even as comic movies have like made big postures of representation, right? It's still like a deeply white like arena in terms of like what is
Yeah,
getting made, you know?
yeah,
And seeing that change on a way smaller scale, right? Where there's like a lot more independent books and people are doing, it would be nice to see that get reflected into film more, right?
yeah, yeah. I
And
agree.
I don't think that's impossible.
I think it's super possible. It's just like we gotta find the right. I guess we gotta find the right franchise, then nail it, because like the ones that are being picked currently are not the ones.
Yeah.
Um, I guess my last question for you is there an older comic book movie that you think people should go back and revisit?
Um, that's a good question. Thing is, I'm trying to think of like yeah, comic book movies that are older than like the Superman stuff, or like the original Superman and Batman movies, or like 2002 Spider-Man, which I feel like is, or like, yeah, I guess 2000 X-Men is like the resurgence there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I don't know if I've seen a ton of like Darkman seems cool. I think that's based on a comic book.
Darkman's super interesting too because Darkman's not a comic book.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was like, is it? I don't remember. I guess I'll say like this is somewhat sidestepping the question, but Unbreakable, the M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Yeah, Unbreakable.
And that's great. And I think it's a really good like interrogation of superhero stuff in a way that feels really thoughtful and totally works. And it's also just like it is an astoundingly beautiful movie. I guess I haven't seen that much M. Night Shyamalan stuff, especially in a while. But that movie, judging by that movie, he's an impeccable craftsman. It's just like beautifully shot and blocked, well worth revisiting, I think. And I think it gets into like, I think it asks this question, like, what would a superhero really be able to do? And it kind of comes to kind of harrowing answers in a way that feels interesting, especially in light of like the surge of those kinds of movies we had. That doesn't really count. But I guess I haven't seen that many comic book movies.
But I think that's fair because it's such a kind of inspiration for that resurgence of comic book movies and kind of modern comic book movies that it itself gets lost in its own lore when you get to Glass.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an interesting unintentional commentary on the comic book market.
Yeah. I have some friends who are like big batters for the next couple of movies, so I'm gonna get to them, but haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, I think for me, my easy answers are Batman 66 or Batman the movie.
Batman 66 owns.
Yeah,
fantastic movie. Yeah,
and I think it's best paired with Batman Returns, not the Tim Burton Batman movie, the first one, but the second one. Not only because I think the second one's better, but I think it kind of shows you how they're very much about the books of the time. And if you look at the books that coming out at that time, they read very similar to each other. Like the Batman movie, like is the 60s Batman books in movie form, and it works so well for that. And also at the same time, Batman Returns is an extremely interesting movie when it comes to Burton in general, because it's Burton has his issues with casting. But that movie is extremely feminist forward.
Yeah.
For a movie where a woman gets beat up a lot in it, where like Catwoman has such a agency in that movie and is struggling to keep her agency, where people keep on trying to pull it away from her, is such an interesting thing that no one talks about.
Yeah, I should. That's a movie I should really revisit. I know it's I believe I could be getting this wrong, but this is actually a great film writer who people should check out. Angelica Jade Bastian, who writes at Vulture. I think it's one of her favorites.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like, but that read of it rings true to me, despite having not seen it in a while. I think also a thread between Batman 66 and Batman Returns is they're both high camp.
Yeah.
Right? And it takes it in very different directions, because like Batman Returns is obviously kind of gothic, right? But they're both, and they're also movies that I think, kind of have a queer element because of how like campy they are, right?
Yeah.
That's like associated with certain communities and certain aesthetics, right? In a way that like, So I think those are good picks.
And if you want more of a modern revisit, I think honestly look at X-Men, the first X-Men movie, to see kind of like a superhero movie that could kind of touch politically without kind of, I guess, the overstep its company's wants. I think I don't know if it holds up as well now. I don't think it does.
Well, I think it's also tough because given what we know about like who Bryan Singer is.
Yes, yeah. But I think the insular comic book movie starts with X-Men in more ways than it does, because we talk about like Spider-Man still saving people. X-Men's not. There's no X-Men movie where they're actively trying to save anybody other than the X-Men.
Well, they try to stop the. Well, I was about to. Well, I could spoil it. They try to stop the entire UN from becoming mutants or whatever.
Yeah, but like the main thing is like we don't want to be the bad guys. So like that's like the end goal is like we don't want to be portrayed as the bad guys, and I think that's a super fascinating. Like you can compare, I feel like the first X-Men movie, or even like the first two X-Men movies to Snyder's superhero movies, and kind of get kind of similar themes out of both of them.
Yeah.
Last question I have is Brett asked, what comic movie do we think stayed true to the vision? And I'm wondering like which angle you're going to go with on this, and which angle I'm going to go with this.
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, like it's a lot of these movies I haven't seen in a while. But off the top of the dome, first thing that comes to mind is Raimi's Spider-Man. Because I feel like it captures Like, I mean, yeah, especially 1 and 2. I haven't seen 3 since it came out, so I can't really comment on that. But like they capture something really great about that character and capture the specifics of it. And you like, even though they're not like strictly faithful in terms of like events or even like presentation, you can tell that Raimi has like read those comic books and loves them. Like I remember there's interviews with him where he's like, "Yeah, Spider-Man's basically a soap opera," and I
Mhm.
wanted to make sure that that came across, right? And I think that like that's a really great way to think about adapting these kinds of things, you know. And I think I think it totally works. Those movies are great. Um,
I think mine would be. There's better answers, but I want to kind of play off of yours. I think Amazing Spider-Man 1. Um,
ooh, see,
because that
I'll them's fighting words, but it's fine.
well, let me just say, I don't think Amazing Spider-Man 1's a good movie. I think
Yeah,
it's okay movie. It's a fine movie. It's a competent movie. It's a very boring movie to me. But I do think its characters are, um, they nail they nail the original, I think, sense of some of those characters, or the original
Mhm.
sense that Stan Lee was going for in those original characters back in the comics. A bit better than Raimi. Raimi plays up that soap opera aspect a bit more,
Yeah,
but Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone come across as they are not teenagers, but they do come across more realistically teenagers and more
yeah,
realistically struggling with being teenagers or almost out of
yeah.
high school teenagers.
I think they do. It's weird because I'm sure they were about the same age as Toby and
Yeah,
Kristen filming it, but they do look younger at the very least,
yeah,
right?
and like the idea that Peter was a loner and nerd is kind of one of those things that's like not true because like the original comics, he's kind of just a jerk to a lot of people,
He
and
really
that's why no one
is.
really
Yeah,
likes him.
that's like facts.
Like that's
Uh,
like kind of the reason no one likes him in those originals because Spider-Man's like being Spider-Man, he's easy able to talk to people because he's wearing a mask. He's able to
yeah.
function. But
Hmm.
when he's Peter, he's kind of just cold and rude to people, and that's why no one likes him. And Andrew
Hmm.
Garfield portrays that better than any Spider-Man has so far. Where like Andrew Garfield's super, super, super awkward when he's out of the mask. But as
Yeah.
soon as the Spider-Man mask is on in that movie, he is the funniest person and the person you want to hang out with.
Right. I and again, like the to be clear, like my issue with Amazing Spider-Man is definitely not, Andrew
Yeah.
Garfield, who I think is like perfectly fine or like good in those movies even, but yeah, we don't need to get into it. But yeah, that makes sense to
We
me.
should do an Amazing Spider-Man bonus episode at some point. 'Cause
Well,
I don't mind
I,
trashing that movie just fine.
I just watch that movie get mad.
I have to watch two. I still have not seen two.
Do you ever think about how the end of Amazing Spider-Man 1 is like the opposite of Spider-Man 1?
Yeah, it's
It
not.
sucks. I hate it. Anyway.
I think Spider-Man 1 is like it misses the point on, or like the original Spider-Man trilogy misses the point on characters, but I think it's one of the most fun movies to watch.
Yeah.
So Grace, where can people find your stuff?
I think you can find me at Grace_Machine on Twitter, Patreon at patreon.com/Grace in the Machine. And I'm regularly on Uppercut and on Paste, writing about video games. So,
And yeah, you can follow this show on Twitter at YComicsPod, at Facebook@facebook.com/YComicsPodcast. Email me at ycomicspodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions for future guests, want to be a guest on the show yourself, or have a story about how comics impacted you, you can reach me at any of those places. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review and tell a friend. Logo for the show is done by Andy Manley, who you can see working on The Simpsons currently.
ooh.
Banner is by my friend Steven, and the theme is Join the Restaurant by David Szesztay. And remember, everybody, that Captain America punch Nazis. And Craig leave. Wait, you are recording though.
it would do this all the time. I'm just in a friend's like podcast Discord server, and so it would always like, I'm not recording. I guess we can leave.
Yeah, I guess we could, but man, what if you did?
Oh,
I didn't mean to leave yet.
no, you're all good.
I was like, what if Craig wasn't recording? Idiot. That would be upsetting.
Yeah.
This would just be a lost episode. I'll just put up what I had.
Oh man.
Try that. What? Okay, I'm booting Craig. Ban Craig. Didn't record.